Some crimes don't leave behind noise. No alarms. No witnesses screaming in the street. Just empty rooms and questions that come far too late. This is one of those stories. The name Irina Gaidamachuk doesn't sound frightening at first. It sounds ordinary, almost forgettable. And that's part of what made this case so devastating. Because behind that name were women no one was really watching over. Elderly, living quietly, trusting the wrong person at the wrong moment. There's a heaviness to this case. You can feel it before you understand it. And it's okay to pause here and acknowledge that. Nothing about this is light. Nothing about it should be rushed. This story isn't told for shock. It's told because the victims deserve more than silence, more than a brief mention, more than being remembered only for how their lives ended. Before we continue, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like, comment and share. Okay, let's proceed. Before the crimes, before her name meant anything to anyone, Irina Gaidamachuk lived a life that was painfully ordinary, and that's the part that's hardest to sit with. She was born in Russia during the late Soviet period, in a small industrial city shaped by routine and survival. Long winters, apartment blocks, a life built around getting through the day. Nothing about her childhood stands out in the records. No dramatic warning signs, no headline-worthy trauma. Just a quiet upbringing that blended into the background, like so many others. She grew up, married, became a mother, lived in modest apartments, took public transport, bought groceries, did the same small things millions of people do every day. If you passed her on the street, you wouldn't have looked twice. That's what I mean by normal. Later, her marriage ended, and she became a single mother struggling financially. Life narrowed. Bills, stress, pressure that never really lets up. But I want to be clear about this. Hardship explains strain. It does not excuse what came later. Before the violence, Irina wasn't living a secret life. She wasn't seen as dangerous or explosive. She was withdrawn, unremarkable, easy to forget. And that's what makes this story uncomfortable. Not because it softens her crimes, but because it reminds us how close ordinary life can sit next to something unimaginable. Think about it this way. Nothing in her daily routine screamed danger. Morning still came. Errands still needed to be run. People around her went on with their lives without suspicion. And that's unsettling, because it forces us to confront a truth we don't like. Sometimes there's no clear moment where someone becomes something else. Sometimes the shift happens quietly, unnoticed, until it's already too late. That's why understanding who she was before matters, not to justify, but to fully grasp the weight of what followed. Between 2002 and 2010, in Russia's Sverdlovsk Oblast, Irina Gaidamachuk targeted elderly women who lived alone, mostly pensioners, widows, people who had small routines and trusted familiarity. Here is what I mean. These weren't random locations. She went to apartments in towns like Krasnofimsk, Serov, and surrounding areas. Places where neighbors knew each other, where life moved slowly, and where an unfamiliar face didn't always raise alarm. Irina Gaidamachuk would knock on doors. Sometimes she pretended to need help. Other times she claimed to be from a utility service or asked to use a phone. These were everyday excuses, the kind you don't question too hard, especially if you've lived your whole life believing people are generally decent. Once inside, she attacked the women and stole small amounts of money and valuables, often just enough to buy alcohol, not wealth, not status. This wasn't about luxury or power in the usual sense. It was about opportunity and repetition. Think about it this way. The harm wasn't just the loss of life, it was the destruction of safety. These women's homes were supposed to be the one place they didn't have to be afraid. Over the years, at least 17 elderly women were killed. Investigators later confirmed this number, though there were concerns there could have been more victims. The murders stretched across nearly a decade, partly because the crimes happened in different towns, and partly because there was no clear pattern at first. And that matters, because when crimes don't look dramatic on the surface, they're easier to miss. No public scenes, no immediate witnesses, just silence behind closed doors. By the late 2000s, police began to connect the cases. The victims were similar: elderly, living alone, attacked inside their apartments, small amounts of money missing. Slowly, a picture started to form. In 2010, Irina Gaidamachuk was arrested. During questioning, she confessed, not to one or two crimes, but to a long series of them. Investigators described her admissions as direct and detailed. Psychological evaluations later showed she understood her actions and their consequences. She was tried and convicted in 2012. The court sentenced her to 20 years in prison, which was the maximum sentence available under Russian law at the time for a woman convicted of multiple murders. She was also ordered to undergo psychiatric treatment while incarcerated. Here's my stance, and I'm not neutral about it. This case isn't frightening because of how dramatic it is. It's frightening because of how quiet it was. Because it happened behind doors that should have meant safety. Because the victims were people society too often overlooks. Elderly women living alone, trusting the world the way they always had. And here is what really stays with me. This wasn't a crime driven by chaos or desperation in a single moment. It happened again and again over years without interruption. That tells us something uncomfortable about how easily vulnerable people can disappear without immediate notice. Irina Gaidamachuk's name is known now. Her victims' names, far less so. And I think that's backward. If this story feels heavy, that's appropriate. It should. Not because of fear, but because of recognition. These were real lives, real routines, real doors opened on ordinary days. And remembering that might be the most important part of telling this story at all. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe, like, comment and share.